Yeah, we're going to talk about the setup, how targeted individuals are set up. Oh, you've been set up all right. Oh, yeah. And if you're experiencing that higher form of harassment, well, you've probably been prepped since you were a child. Okay? That foreshadow stage that I've talked about before, where you get all those little comments and innuendos, that can start when you're a little kid. You know, I believe that a lot of this is spiritual, and they've got a plan. They do. When you get into theology, a lot of people look at the scenarios that surround someone's life, the circumstances and all that. And a lot of people assume that that's God's sovereign will, that it's part of his plan. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of possibilities, and I've seen people's lives go in a certain direction and just completely switch when God intervenes. And a lot of people up to that point assumed, all kinds of things about that person. That God had a negative plan or whatever. And, targeted individuals are the same way. I think people protect themselves with that type of syllogistic thinking. I remember when I was a little kid, I would see someone who was afflicted, handicapped, or maybe even deformed or something, and it used to scare the crap out of me. And I remember talking to people in my family and people around me, and it was very common for people to say something like, well, it only happens to bad people. You better be good, and turn it into some little, Fat Albert life lesson or something. And it's just not true. It's not. And I think that targeted individuals are dealt with that way. I think a lot of this stuff, can be, centered around group dynamics. And not everybody gets involved in harassing targeted individuals, but, a lot of people allow it. And I think they're protecting themselves in that way. They assume that the targeted individual has done something. And a lot of times, disinformation campaigns can be involved. People are getting paid, all sorts of things. And targeted individuals are set up. I had somebody mention in the comments, make a video about how, targeted individuals are set up. Maybe even in a way that they're, prosecuted as a criminal. And I've talked about that before, that, targeted individuals are pushed. They're pushed in a lot of areas. It's hard for them to hold a job. They're getting harassed at work. Sometimes they get into substance abuse to try to deal with the stress. That's a frightening scenario because you never know what the hell's going to happen. There's all kinds of things. Everything from DUIs to, just being at the wrong place at the wrong time and having that buildup of stress and frustration. And, I made that video, gang stalking, I don't remember, I think it had to do with people being provoked into becoming violent or retaliating and, finding themselves, either in a mental institution or in a prison scenario. And that's one of the ways people are set up too. There's a lot of pressure on victims of gang stalking. And that can happen. It can. People are being set up to be a danger to themselves. Depression is very dangerous. I've talked about how this whole thing is reckless. I think it's murder. And, when someone gets pushed like that, you never know what they're going to do. They could be getting set up for, something like suicide. or, they could, accidentally get into a car accident and kill someone. I almost got ran over in a parking lot today. Strangest thing I ever seen. I was walking into a grocery store, and this lady pulls up, you can't park right in front of the door. Or she did. She was about halfway in between both doors, and I was, I didn't think anything of it. I don't know what she was doing. I wasn't really paying attention, and she slams it into reverse and just hits the gas, man. Coming right at me. And I'm thinking, what the hell? And I yelled, I can't, I'm crippled. I can't move that fast. And it just barely missed me. And she hit the brakes, rolled down the window, and said, "Oh, I'm not trying to kill you," and laughed. I got very frustrated. I freaked out on her a little bit. I did. Okay. I'm going to admit it. I said a couple things that I probably shouldn't have said, and she took off. But really, what was she doing? I mean, she, full blast on the gas pedal. I don't know, whatever. I don't know. I probably shouldn't have mentioned that, but there's a lot of things that can happen when people just aren't thinking correctly. And I'm assuming that something was, going through her head where she just wasn't paying attention to what she was doing. But I don't know. That was kind of weird. That might have been some gang stalking right there. But people are. They're being set up. They are being deceived. They're being sent delusions. But, the scary part about targeted individuals and, the natural reaction to what they're dealing with, which can manifest in irrational fear and a lot of other things, is that the stuff that they think they're being paranoid about and might be ashamed of is really nothing compared to the reality of what they're dealing with. I believe that a lot of targeted individuals out there, they have no idea what they are really dealing with. And that's one of the reasons why I make these videos. I believe that there are things like MK Ultra. I believe that targeted individuals are being attacked with energy weapons. I believe that they're experimented on. I believe that they are dealing with things, like implants and all kinds of things we don't even know about. They're being covertly drugged, all kinds of things. But it goes even further down the rabbit hole than that. I believe this stuff is spiritual. And when you're getting into that, you're dealing with a whole nother level of, things to be afraid of, things that you don't even understand. And the ramifications of those things can last forever. It's one thing to deal with the government. It's one thing to deal with somebody who's an experienced handler or, has equipment or something like that. It's another thing to deal, with an entity in another dimension that has experience that could span, thousands of years. Not only that, a network that encompasses the whole planet. You want to talk about, community harassment. It doesn't get any worse than that. And a lot of targeted individuals find that out. They try to leave. They try to take off. They try to escape, to find some peace, start their life over, and it's waiting. And that's why. That's why. You're dealing with manipulation at the highest level. Coercion. Mind control, literally, in its, most frightening form. A lot of people talk about different types of technology that could control the minds of people, maybe even the hive mind kind of scenario. You got neural monitoring, and people talk about all kinds of things. What I'm saying is, okay, wonderful. I believe some of that stuff is possible, but I believe it's worse than that. And I get criticized for trying to go too deep on this. I don't think people understand. I don't think people are catching on to this whole thing that they're dealing with. And when I start talking about the spiritual side of it, people own demons. Oh, you thinking you're going to blame it on demons now? I don't think you know what you're talking about. When you're dealing with technology, when you're dealing with all that stuff, when you're dealing with things that are dimensional, you're dealing with, not only the three-dimensional world that you live in, but everything around it. We're not the only thing. This isn't everything. Whatever your understanding is about where you are and what you're dealing with, a lot of it is just invisible to you. It is. It's a red pill, blue pill scenario. A lot of people just don't want to know. They're overwhelmed with the things that they're dealing with already. Thinking about maybe family members harassing them, their friends turning against them, workplace harassment, all that. That's bad enough. Now you got to deal with things you can't even see, things in another dimension. Forget it. People, I can see why they don't want to believe it. I think they're protecting themselves a little bit. I can't blame them. But like I said before, the things that people are paranoid about, whether people are making fun of them because they think the helicopters are following them or whatever, well, it's worse than that. You can laugh about that stuff. I can see why people believe it, though. But you know what? The reality of it's far worse. And I think that's something that needs to sink in. And the other reason people have an aversion to religion is because of the corruption. They don't understand what's going on. You have obvious charlatans and false doctrines and things that just don't make sense. And, all those things, they were prophesied about in the Bible. And, they really have nothing to do with the truth. There's a lot of corruption. You have a lot of different denominations, and it's very confusing for somebody to just, look at it. Well, I got to go to church. Let's get to church. Got to get me and talking to the pastor. Where are you going to go? Well, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over to the Catholics. Okay. Well, you're dealing with a lot of stuff there that's not biblical. I'm going to go over to the Pentecostals. Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't make sense either. Well, I'm going to go over to this place. Or I'm going to go to that place. Well, those guys believe that God ordained all this stuff, and either you're chosen or you're not. Predestinating people to hell and people to heaven. Well, that's where are you going to go? And you have creedal statements of faith, and you have a lot of corruption. And, money has given birth to all these religious institutions. And if you want to get a job at them, you got to believe what they believe. You got to go to their seminary and everything. And so what happens? People, they just look at everything as if it's just religion. It's not real. It's inconsistent. But that has really nothing to do with the Bible. And it doesn't have anything to do with the spiritual dimension that is described in it. And I've referenced Michael Heiser before. If you guys want to get into that, look at Reversing Herman or Angels and Demons or The Unseen Realm. His work is very interesting. And it has to do with, looking at the Bible and interpreting it through the eyes of people that it was written to in context. It's important. So yeah, you're being set up to believe things that aren't true. You're being set up to react. You might be set up to, get thrown in jail, to be at war with people, to make enemies, to think you're crazy. Don't believe it. Guys, be good to yourselves. Be safe.